And we're back, and we are continuing with our Meet the Candidates segment. Of course, this is a part of our preparation leading up to Election Day on November 11th. We are joined in this segment by Cayo Northeast representative for the People's United Party. We're joined by Orlando Habet. Good morning.
Good morning, Marlene. Good morning to all our viewers in Belize, especially those in Cayo Northeast.
Well, is it a cool morning there or a rainy morning there?
It's rather cool. The sun is already coming out, so we're being prepared for a warm day, I guess.
I was going to say, from the cool to the heat. Well, Orlando, we're glad to have the opportunity to learn more about some of our candidates across the country. And so we're starting off by hearing a bit more about what motivates the individual candidates to put themselves forward for the election. Let's talk about yours. What makes you want to be the representative for Cayo Northeast?
I think that I am a person who likes to work. I like to do things. A few years ago, I was working in Belmopan, and I thought that I could participate in politics at the local level, and I attempted to get into the elections for the municipality. Yeah. And in 2000, I won the election to become the first directly elected mayor of San Ignacio and Santa Elena. Mm-hmm. I like to work with people. I like to do a lot of the work that had to be done. Sometimes people think that it's only the drains and streets that you have to be fixing, but there's a lot of work that you do with people, collaboration, looking at the issues of recreation for young people and adults. We established things like the first anti-crime committee. We worked along with the traffic department to improve everything that had to do with the municipality. We looked at the areas of job creation because we have deficiency in the number of jobs needed versus what were available and things like that. But I want to see that, especially that my community gets their fair share of the country's resources for their development. Being in opposition for the past 12 years and myself just being elected for the past 5 years, I have seen that because the constituency goes one certain way, the government doesn't support that constituency, and it is really affecting our communities because there is no development. Yeah. I always say, what if one party continues to win for 5 consecutive terms and you have 25 years? It means that one sector of the country will not develop and will be 25 years behind the rest. Yeah. And things like that have to change, and it motivates me to get in so that I can do the work, but also that I can be there on a personal basis, in cabinet, especially when we win, to make certain that I can get a fair share of the country's resources for the development of my community.
Now, you're in a position similar to the incumbent government, where people can use your track record to be able to distinguish whether or not they want to elect you back into office. Since you've been elected from 2015, what do you say, what is your most significant contribution to your constituency?
I believe that in the past we have had representatives, but we haven't had the kind of participation from those representatives in the House, looking at not only participating by going and sitting down, but someone that would be there, prepare himself, do their research, and stand up in the House of Representatives to ask for the things that are needed for their constituency. Mm-hmm. And not only at the constituency level, but I have been there in the House seeking to those things, the issues that are pertinent to the entire nation. For example, when I would be in the House speaking about issues of health, they only not pertain to my constituency, but on a national level. And so I believe that that was one of the areas where I could represent my people best, because I walk the villages, I consult with the people in my town, and when I find out what are the real necessities, those are the areas that I would take up to the House of Representatives during the adjournment. And so I believe the people appreciate that. They have seen that there wasn't any one given time where we had a House meeting in which I just sat down and never said anything. I was always there defending not only the rights, but the needs of my constituency.
And how did you overcome I mean, there's an obvious constraint when you were a part of the opposition and a representative. The people want you there, but the level of influence you have is not as much as you'd like. How did you overcome that constraint?
I was fortunate to have a very good executive committee. My committee and I would meet on a frequent basis, and we would come up with certain plans for at least small projects that we could do. We also had the contribution from business people in the community who would contribute towards our small projects. And so it made us really be able to do not the big things. We couldn't do a road construction or the paving of a road, but we could do the small things. Working with the schools especially, we dedicated ourselves to work with all the schools in our constituency. Whatever it was do a paint job for the school, in the parks, if we had to scrape up the old bleachers and paint them again. I did things like, in my first year, actually, we did contribution to all the schools of some water fountains and water bottles so that the children could have good drinking water in all the schools. We would clean up parks, cemeteries, and get a lot of cleanup campaigns in most of the villages. Where I had less things to do in terms of cleanup and stuff like that was in San Ignacio town. And I always tell my constituency that whilst we wanted to do it, we have to realize that in the town, the mayor has jurisdiction over the town. And so it wasn't as easy, because then you'd have to be asking for permission to do this, permission to do that. But we were able to plant a few trees, work with the schools, and do other small activities within the constituency. So basically, working along with my constituency and the business community, we were able to do those small projects that were significant. Major roads, connecting village to village. We are also fortunate that in our constituency, we have the Spanish Lookout community who assisted us with machinery to do the grading and rolling of the roads, even though we would have liked to seen it paved and to put good drainage. The government didn't ever listen to us. As a matter of fact, there was once when the Minister of Works told me that I should pave the road because I promised it during my campaign. And my response was, it is my responsibility to stand up here in the House to request the things that are needed by my constituency, but it is your obligation as the Minister of Works to do it. But it always fell on the affairs.
Let's look a bit at the dynamics of your constituency, because when you look at the populations that you serve, and you also look at the different sectors that are associated with it, it's quite extensive. You were talking about the tourism within the Twin Towns itself. Definitely the productive sectors is a major focus as well. And also things like environmental issues. So there's a lot going on when it comes to tourism alone, and there's also a need for focus on agriculture. When you go out to campaign once again, what are you saying to people that that voting you back into office, that you want to be able to accomplish in these areas?
Well, if we look at the demise of the tourism industry, we believe that when a PUP government comes in and I become the representative for Cayo Northeast, we will be able to bring back the tourism industry. It won't be easy and it won't be overnight, but we will have to refocus and we'll have to make certain that the tourism industry is developed along with other industries. And you mentioned clearly that one of them has to be the agriculture industry. We need to promote our agriculture not only the large-scale agriculture, but also small farmer agriculture, the participation of the family farming, for example, where families who have small parcels of land can start producing some vegetables, some fruits, not only for their own family supply and need, but also to be able to sell so that they can get some income to purchase the books, to purchase the uniforms, to send their children to school and stuff like that. But we have to start to get our tourism industry to really consume what we produce. We are blessed that we have good arable land in our area, that a lot of agriculture is being produced. There are a lot of grains, corn, beans, rice. We also have most of the poultry. We have a lot of pigs. We have a lot of cattle. And we see our area that we have the potential for going into a lot of the manufacturing and processing in some of the agriculture products and some of the livestock products, into the meats and producing sausages and hams and picnics and all the other meat cuts. And so we also see where I can push for our constituency to be able to do a lot more than that, but also the further processing. Our small farmers normally produce white corn, while the larger farmers, the Mennonites, produce more of the yellow corn. Having a corn mill that produces, a factory that produces corn flour, will allow our small farmers to have a market for their white corn, and so that they can have an income. And we are already talking with some of the potential investors who are looking into that also. We have the meat processors who are looking to expand their production facilities, but they want to see a government that would also support them in that area of product substitution. Why should we be importing the same products that we produce, especially when we are importing from countries that subsidize their products, and then it makes us non-competitive? So we have to address those issues.
I think you're touching on one of the things, just if you'd allow me so we could get a bit more. One of the things that I really wanted to hear about, which is, what are your voters saying? What are the issues? When we talk about the complete collapse of tourism in March, you have businesses, I imagine, that are trying to stay open or to reopen for when the tourists come back. You have people who don't have work, and so families without an income. The agriculture sector as well, while they have been able to sustain us during this time, they're also talking about things like market access. They're talking about being able to touch on the very same issue that you mentioned, looking at what we import, and also getting assistance in making viable exports. So let me hear from you. When you go out for, campaigning for another term, what are they telling you?
Well, if we look at the larger producers, they are looking at, they have always been taught that they need to produce for the local market and also to have the excess being exported. They are asking, what can we do to change this? And what I'm saying is, right now, with COVID-19, which will not go away right now, and having just on our back door, Guatemala and El Salvador with a combined population of about 25 million people, let us be able to double or even triple our production, because there is an unlimited market right next door. And that will allow them to be able to even produce at a lower cost, because in terms of scale, so locally we will have a cheaper product, but we'll also have a larger foreign exchange income because of the exports. The small farmers are asking what we will do with the products that they are able to produce. And what we are saying is, many times, especially for the small producer, they can go out and plant and produce. The problem is harvest time, because they don't have good roads. And so a lot of times their produce stays in the field and rots because of the rains and everything else, and they can't get it in. So what they want is for us to be able to provide those road accesses to their farms so that they can take out their produce. But also they want a market. And so what we are doing is our agriculture sector will have a two-pronged approach, one with the small farmer and the larger farmer. And we are hoping by talking and having meetings with the large farmers, they are already in tune that what we want to do is so that they become the market for the small producer. And then the large producer can combined as an organization or a group can do the exports. So they will be exporting, but the small farmer will have an avenue to sell their products through the larger farmers. Okay. And basically, road access is something. The farmers also want to know if we as a government will be able to assist in other areas. And the areas that they want is facilitation. And that is what a government is supposed to do. They should not be directly involved. We have, and we know that we have assistance through the FAO to every so often we get certain programs where we can assist small farmers. We have heard of programs where they assist with a few sheep, some local chickens, feed, seeds for planting. Farmers also need to know that they will be assisted by the government whenever they have an incident like a hurricane or a drought, like what has happened recently. And right now farmers are desperate because they have lost their crops 2 years in a row, but there is no assistance coming forward from the government. So these are things that they are concerned about. And they want to know that there is a government that has a policy and a plan that can be put into effect so that they can have a direction in which the farmers will go. We don't want to be able to produce potatoes, for example, and not have how to store it for a longer period. So farmers want to know, I will plant potatoes in November, December, January, but I don't want to have my potatoes rot in the field because I can't sell it. And most of the time, the problem there would be, for example, storage. Yeah. So we have to be able to provide those services for our small producers so that they can have a good livelihood.
And what about those from the Twin Towns, those who have lost the tourism dollar? What's your plan there?
I believe that the tourism will pick up, but very slowly, as what we are seeing right now. We are looking at, as a party, as I said, trying to get our fair share. I know that in any recession, the government has to do some government spending. So there will undoubtedly, the government will have to seek out some additional loans to be able to boost up the economy so that eventually the private sector can take over. Let's look at the area of housing. If I can get my fair share of the housing construction in my constituency, that will create a lot of employment because construction creates a lot of employment. It takes up a lot of labor. But also, it also generates income for the private sector by where you will be able to buy the steel, the cement, the nails, the wire, and everything else, the roofing. And so the businesses make money, the laborers have a job, and we are also at the same time, so it's like killing 3 birds with 1 stone, providing a house for our people who don't have a house, who don't own a home, so that we're looking at those issues. In the tourism sector, I believe that whilst we may not be able to provide a job directly in tourism, they might be able to get a job which they can do something to earn an income while the tourism industry picks up. So that's what we're looking at.
What are some of your priorities that you're using as a platform for your campaign when you reach out to voters? And also in that, I want you to share with me how you're reaching out to voters given the current pandemic that we're facing.
Yes. In San Ignacio and in our surrounding villages, one of the greatest needs, as we mentioned, is jobs. Yeah. And so we have addressed that a little. But we have also heard from our people, and I believe that this happens throughout the entire country, both if you're PUP, UDP, doesn't matter. You always get requests for help from your constituents. And based on the last 5 years, my experience is that most of the help sought by your constituents is in the areas of health and education. If my party can provide what we have promised in our national manifesto of providing free education, at least starting with preschool and primary school, then there is no need for them to come to me for that assistance. So we have to work hard to make sure that we can provide that free education. But we have to also look at the schools. There are schools that are dilapidated, and so we'll have to look at how we can refurbish those schools so that they provide a good environment for learning. In the area of health, which is very important, not only do people come to you for assistance for health because they can't pay the cost of the hospitals, especially the private hospitals, but also the medication. And it's something that happens on a daily basis. So what we have in San Ignacio, for example, is what they call a community health hospital. We need to upgrade that hospital. I know it might go against the grain of what other people are thinking because we have a regional health hospital in Belmopan. But San Ignacio is the capital of the Cayo district. And our hospital serves San Ignacio, Santa Elena, Benqueviejo, and we have some 20 plus villages that surround our communities or our main towns. And there are a lot of people. We have over 35,000 people that live in this area. And so we need to provide a hospital that can provide adequate health services. I know we are speaking on a national basis of the national health insurance, and that will be a boost for our health system in the area. But I would like to see that I can convince my party to get the funding it won't be much, it's just to provide services. For example, we need to have a male, female, and children's ward in our hospital. There is no way that we can continue having women housed in the same ward where it's just separated by a curtain and there's no privacy. We have to improve that. We need to improve the laboratory facilities for our hospital. Somebody has an infection, you have to take a swab, send it to Guatemala or to Lee City sometimes, but many times it has to go to another country to get a result in 5 days or a week. That is not practical. It can't continue that way. We also need to have our own surgery ward. And I believe, from what I have been told, the hospital structure has the capacity for just opening up a room and converting it into a small surgical ward. Things like cesareans, people are rushed. On a daily basis, you hear the ambulance going from San Ignacio to Belmopan, to a hospital that is worse because it's dilapidated, it leaks and everything else. We can't continue that way. And that is one thing that we need to do. But also, Marlene, that the private sector is concerned, because when people get sick and they miss days, it is a loss for the private sector. So they want to see that we have an improved health system. And those are some of the areas that I really want to address to improve in San Ignacio and for the surrounding villages.
Yeah.
And of course, having the small health posts in the communities so that the doctor and nurse could frequent and look at small things like vaccinations or the public health care that they have to do.
Yeah.
So those areas, if addressed, will help our communities dramatically.
Now, when you go out to voters and as the current representative, I mean, how do you explain to them? What do you say to them that you want to do these things, but you weren't able to do it over the past 5 years?
Yes, I believe that our communities have been listening. They have been seeing me when we attend our house meetings, and they have been hearing me make the request.
Yeah.
I have even told the Prime Minister, for example, in a house meeting, listen, I get assistance from the Mennonite community, but they are not the government. We need our government to step up. Yeah. Why is it? And I tell my people, and I remind them, that in the Cayo Northeast constituency, we had the petroleum industry. And the Prime Minister himself announced in a house meeting that we had received an income coming from BNE as their share of taxes, permits, licenses, and royalties in the tune of over $650 million. And whilst I can understand that any natural resource, the profits of those should be shared to the whole country to develop, to have national development. But any smart administration would spend at least a small percentage of that money in the area where that resource came from. And 90% of the petroleum industry is in Cayo Northeast, but not a single cent was spent. Yet the Prime Minister had the audacity to come into Cayo Northeast in 2013 when I was doing the recall against my former opponent because of the passport scandal, and said, do not sign the petition, and I promise you that we will spend millions and millions of dollars and there will be unprecedented development. To this day, not a single cent has been spent. Take, for example, Marlene, I also remind my constituents that they can hear me, and they heard me requesting in the House for a high school in the Spanish Docron area. Why, Marlene? Because it is inconceivable how a 13-year-old girl or boy or a 14-year-old in first and second form has to take the bus, go away from Los Tambos to Santa Elena Town, San Ignacio Town, or even Benqueviejo to go to high school. But because they have no electricity or internet and they can't do their assignments, their homework at home, they have to stay back and do it. By that time, the bus leaves and they have to hitchhike to their village at 5, 6 in the evening, and some of them reaching home at 7:30, 8 at night. That is not something that.
So I hear quite a number of
so
issues.
I said, because we have we have about 12 villages that surround Spanish Lookout. And then there's also a rise in the number of young students from Spanish Lookout that are starting to attend high school outside of Spanish Lookout. And so we wanted to build a school in that area. We found the location. We spoke to the owner of the land who was willing to allow the government to acquire the land. The minister agreed, the Minister of Education agreed that they will construct a school. Remember, we had some $35 million coming from the Caribbean Development Bank in September of 2015, I believe it was. And so that would have been our share for Cayo Northeast. The Minister of Education, now running as, if he wins, would become the Prime Minister of this country, God forbid, announced in the House of Representatives that these people, that he spoke to these young children of 12 and 13 years of age coming out of Standard 6, and that 50% or more said they were not going to high school. And he told the Speaker, it seems, Madam Speaker, that they are more designed to the plantations and to the farm. That is discrimination. You cannot designate certain groups or ethnic groups or anybody else to be going only to the plantations. And I responded that even if it were so, because I didn't believe it was so, that then let's build an agriculture school if that's the case, because you can have professional agriculturalists, right? Yeah. And also that you do not go to speak to 12-year-old kids about whether or not they will go to school or not. You speak to the parents, those are minors. So it shows you the kind of thinking that the government has, and so I cannot conceive that. And so I always remind my people, these are the things that you have to remember when you go to the polls, because you have to vote for someone who will defend your rights.
And with that, we're completely out of time. It went by so fast, but we heard quite a bit of the platform that you're presenting to your voters, and hoping and asking that they re-elect you back as their representative. Closing thoughts, Orlando, for the voters of Cayo Northeast. Why should they consider putting you back as their representative come November 11th?
Yes, certainly. The people of Cayo Northeast, when they vote for me, they will have someone that has them in their heart and minds. Someone that has a lot of experience, both in the private sector and in the government, because I have worked with government before. So you will be electing somebody that has experience not only as a mayor of San Ignacio and Santa Elena for 3 years, someone that has been able to manage organizations and associations. I was the general manager for the Poultry Association for 13 years, traveled around the world practically, representing Belize. I was a member of the Trade Negotiating Commission. I participated in the Belize-Guatemala Partial Scope Agreement. The experience I've had in the last 5 years as a member of the House of Representatives gives me a lot of credence, but also because the people of Cayo Northeast know that I'm a hard worker, I am a diligent person, seeking always to do the best for my communities. And when they vote for me, they will get the best representation.
All right. Well, we thank you for joining us today in this introductory session, of course, to the wider community, having us know more about our candidates. Do stay safe on the campaign trail.
Thank you very much. Same to you.
All right. And with that, we're going to go ahead and take our final break. And when we come back, we'll have our wrap up. So please stay tuned.